From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. Venezuela's government has denounced the forced and illegal occupation of some of its diplomatic properties in the United States. Foreign Minister Jorge Ariaza said that this is a clear violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. U.S. authorities must correct this irregular situation immediately. This was a response to representatives of opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido illegally forcing their way into 3 of the country's diplomatic properties. Guaido's envoy says that his cohorts occupied 2 buildings in Washington and 1 in New York. And the People's Forum, a space for social movements in New York, immediately responded, issuing a call out for a protest against U.S. intervention. The People's Forum says that this is another aggression in the long list of attacks against the Bolivarian Revolution. Last week, a North American delegation visited Venezuela. The visit was organized by the U.S. Peace Council for the Committee for International Solidarity in Venezuela. The delegation met with community groups, political parties, and members of the government, including a private meeting with President Nicolás Maduro.
We're with our friends of the World Peace Council. They've come from the United States, and we're very grateful for their presence. We've spoken for more than an hour and a half with all of their expressions of solidarity to say no to the war against Venezuela, no to sanctions against Venezuela.
We are here in Venezuela to demonstrate that there are vast numbers of people in the U.S. who are in opposition to the gangsterism of this current administration. We want the people of this country to know that we stand with you. We understand the importance of Venezuela. We understand that Venezuela's leadership is vital not only for all of Latin America and the Caribbean, but in fact to the world. So we say to the Venezuelan people, stand strong, understand what you represent, understand the importance of this project for all of us. So we're here to remind you of that we are with you. We're here to say to you that our solidarity goes beyond just having meetings. We're prepared to struggle to the end to protect this project.
For more on this visit to Venezuela, we're joined by Miguel Figueroa. Miguel is a longtime political activist in Canada who served as the leader of the Communist Party of Canada for 23 years. He's now the president of the Canadian Peace Congress. Hello, Miguel. Just to get a couple of things out of the way right off the bat, you came at a very interesting time. Can you tell us a bit about what happened with American Airlines and the experience of arriving in Caracas around the time of the sabotage on the electrical system?
Right. Well, fortunately, my own travel arrangements to Caracas through Copa Airlines from Panama City, so I wasn't as affected as some of the other members of the delegation, some of whom are still stranded in Caracas as a result of American Airlines pulling their service out of that country.
And beyond that, what are some of the activities you were able to participate in? Did you get to attend any of the mobilizations in Caracas?
Yes, we participated both in some community activities and some of the colectivos, and also, of course, we were on the. Excuse me, I've forgotten the name of the show, the very famous television broadcast from the chair of the Constituent Assembly, the weekly show. We were participating in that. Unfortunately, I was not able to extra day to actually participate in the meeting with President Maduro, but I was there for the bulk of the delegation, which of course included meetings with Foreign Minister Ariaza, with economists, with representatives from the CNE, from the Electoral Council, and so on. So it was a fantastic visit. During our, particularly when we arrived, there was, of course, still the lingering impact of power outages, even at the airport as a result of the sabotage. But by the time I left Caracas, which was on Friday, service had been virtually restored in full.
And what did you learn from your time there? I guess I'd like to ask, what is your takeaway given the media war, especially in Canada, with Canada's state broadcaster CBC airing so much pro-opposition propaganda?
Yes, well, and in fact, that's one of the main reasons why we jumped at the opportunity to participate in this delegation. It was primarily a delegation of U.S. peace organizations organized by the U.S. Peace Council, but included the United Anti-War Coalition, the International Action Center, Veterans for Peace, and so on. But there were 2 of the 12 of us who were from Canada, myself and Eva Bartlett, who's of course, a rather well-known independent journalist who is also a Canadian. And we thought it was important that we come as well because Canada, particularly in the recent period, has not just been supporting this Washington-driven regime change strategy, the attack on Venezuela and on the Bolivarian Revolution, but in fact has been playing a leading role, particularly in the Lima group. And in the first place, the Global Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, has been virulent in her attacks on Venezuela and on the Maduro government, and essentially on spreading all sorts of lies, not just a mountain of lies, an ocean of lies about the reality in Venezuela. So to be able to go there and see firsthand what the situation is certainly reinforced our impression that there is not a humanitarian crisis there. There are difficulties for sure. Clearly, the impact of the sanctions and needless to say, the long-term impact of the low oil prices, all of these have affected and impacted on government revenues and so on. But the fact remains that the people remain stoic, resilient, and I would say increasingly defiant of what they now see is not some sort of genuine concern for their welfare, but rather a pretext for intervention, a pretext for even possible aggression and war. And so that's certainly the message that I'll be bringing back, and I've already started that since returning to Toronto to speak to other activists, to our supporters across the country, to inform them about the realities there and the essential need to step up solidarity with the Venezuelan people. We know that in the first place, it will be up to Venezuela and its people, united in the face of this aggression, to stand fast and to hold to their principles and to not be intimidated or panicked by this all-sided drive. But we know that international solidarity also has a big impact.
Thanks so much, Miguel. That was Miguel Figueroa, the president of the Canadian Peace Congress, joining us from Canada. The lower house in Haiti has voted to remove the Prime Minister, Jean-Henri Séant. This comes just 6 months after Séant took office in the midst of a persistent economic and political crisis. 93 members of parliament voted in favor of the motion to sack Séant, while 6 voted against and 3 abstained. The Prime Minister did not attend the vote. He had expected to face a vote of no confidence in the Senate, but they did not reach quorum. The president of Mozambique fears that the death toll from Cyclone Idai could exceed 1,000 victims. South Africa has announced it is sending troops to help with recovery efforts. The tropical storm has damaged 90% of the southern city of Beira, the second most populated city. Rescuers evacuated people from a port city devastated by the cyclone. A dam burst on Sunday, cutting off the last road remaining to the city of about 500,000 people. According to the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Federation, at least 160 people died in Mozambique, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Meanwhile, rescue workers have started a search for survivors of the devastating cyclone. The official death toll in Mozambique still stands at 84, but according to authorities, more than 100,000 people are still in danger.
Flying sheets of metal, decapitated people. Some people are in hospital. It's really bad. No one is rescuing us here. We don't eat properly, we don't sleep properly, we have no home.
The biggest threat we have now, even bigger than the cyclone, is floods, because it's raining more and more, and the hydrographical basins are increasing their level. And here we are in the lower part of the province, which means all the water comes this side.
A group of Zimbabwean school children have been rescued after being stranded for 2 days in the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. Following the heavy storms, roads and bridges were destroyed, leaving school children stranded and trapped by floods. Searches and rescue operations are still ongoing. Our correspondent, Matuba Mitlahi, has the details.
Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi says the death toll from Cyclone Idai could be as high as 1,000. He spoke on state radio on Monday afternoon after he flew by the helicopter over the Indian Ocean port city of Beira and the rural Manica and Sofala provinces, where he reported widespread devastation. Now, at the same time, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa says he has deployed the South African National Defence Force to Mozambique to assist with recovery efforts. Cyclone Idai's trail of destruction has also affected South Africa in a big way. It has caused severe damage, knocking down pylons and affecting power supply here in South Africa, which has had major repercussions. And those power outages have had serious economic losses for many businesses here in the country, as they cannot operate without power. But at this stage, all eyes are on the death toll that's expected to rise sharply as recovery efforts continue in Mozambique. It's back to you, studio.
Thank you, Matuba, for that great report. The death toll for floods in Indonesia has risen to 79 people. More than 4,000 have been displaced and dozens are injured and still missing. The disaster was triggered by torrential rain and landslides and has mostly affected the easternmost province of Papua. The evacuation process is still taking place with affected areas that haven't been reached yet. Those displaced are being sheltered in 6 evacuation centers. Now to Colombia. Indigenous people have blocked a major highway after a week of protests against the government of Iván Duque. Protesters are demanding a meeting with the president, as they say the government breached the agreements regarding their lands. They also reject violence against leaders of their communities. Over the weekend, police repressed social assemblies.
It is worrying that the national government does not show a gesture of willingness to meet with farmers, and we are concerned about the fact that there might be a stronger confrontation than what we have had these past few days.
We'll take a short break now. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. sanctions imposed on Venezuela are also hurting Guyana's economy and the island's financial relations with its South American neighbor. Guyana currently owes Venezuela roughly $115 million under the Petro-Caribe deal. However, the government has not been able to make cash payments to Venezuela given the U.S.-imposed financial restrictions. Guyana's Finance Minister Winston Jordan says repayments are being held in a special account until the sanctions are lifted.
Within the central government. I think also, Mr. Speaker, we must...
The Caribbean Development Bank is projecting a 3% growth rate for Antigua and Barbuda's economy this year. This is due to an increase in tourism and construction activity. The Caribbean Tourism Organization says stayover arrivals grew by just over 9% last year. Similarly, cruise ship passenger arrivals increased by just over 13%. Journalist Gabriel Hernandez has been killed in the south of Honduras. Our correspondent, Hilda Silvestucci, brings us the details.
A journalist from the south of the country, Gabriel Hernandez, was killed this Sunday. The motive for this murder is yet to be clarified, but he had already reported some threats. He was doing some journalistic investigations related to corruption in the council hall of municipality of Valle, the city where he was murdered. Hernandez used to point out the corruption of these authorities as well as from some lawmakers in the area. Over 70 journalists have been killed since 2000. 2001 with an impunity rate that reaches 92%. So far, authorities have not given any detail or explanation. Only the National Commission for Human Rights has urged the authorities to investigate the murder of Gabriel Hernandez.
Now to Argentina, where President Mauricio Macri's government is seeking the removal of a judge who's investigating an illegal espionage web that involves politicians, judges, attorneys, and journalists. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has the details.
The government of Mauricio Macri, through the Minister of Justice, Germán Garabano, has presented to the Judicial Council a complaint calling for the removal of Judge Alejo Ramos Padilla. This is after they tried to stop the judge's investigation into an ideological, judicial and political espionage web involving former officers and businessmen who are all involved in the Notebooks investigation, in which the former president, Cristina Fernández, is also implicated, as are many others. And the judge Ramos Padilla is now investigating the Attorney General, Carlos Stornelli, who is part of that famous case. The judges, congressmen, businessmen, and even intelligence services involved in the investigation are all close to the president. So from this perspective, you can understand the current government's major efforts to bury and stop the investigation. But it's going to be difficult for Macri to move his complaint forward, due to a lack of support from the 9 members of the Judicial Council.
Meanwhile, demonstrators and artists from the social movement Patria Grande held a performance in front of federal justice courts in Buenos Aires. Under the slogan, Comodoro Pig, the pig pen of democracy, the demonstrators denounced the complicity between justice and political power and the persecution of opposition leaders by intelligence agents, the media, and officers. Former Uruguayan President Julio Maria Sanguinetti is running for president once again. He says he plans to make security and unemployment the focus of his campaign. 83-year-old Sanguinetti says Uruguay also needs to modernize education and reform Mercosur. The former president also pointed out that the situation in Venezuela will likely dominate the presidential campaign in the country. He said the government and the opposition must start a dialogue.
For the people, the biggest worry is security, because it is what has unsettled daily life in a country that is traditionally tranquil, with a calm lifestyle. On a wider perspective, today, unemployment is also becoming a worry.
And life is slowly returning to normal at the Brazilian school where 2 former students shot 8 people dead last Wednesday. Students and teachers have started returning to the Raul Brazil school near Sao Paulo, where 5 teenage boys, a teacher, and an administrator were killed. Police say that the 2 attackers planned the attack for more than a year, and they committed suicide as police cornered them inside the building.
The atmosphere was heavy. First, because I walked into the area where the attack took place. I stood in front of the gate of the gym. The moment I entered the room was very bad, because my philosophy teacher was there. I gave him a hug when it was time to go and get my things. Douglas, who sat behind me, died. I kept looking at where he sat several times and wanted to leave the room. I almost forgot my notebook, but everything was fine.
The Peruvian Popular Force Party leader, Keiko Fujimori, has not testified before the public prosecutor. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, has the details.
Keiko Fujimori, the leader of Popular Force and former presidential candidate, decided today to stay silent and not answer any questions the public prosecutor asked in the investigation of alleged asset laundering. Later on social media, she said she hasn't answered anything, arguing that the attorney in charge of the interrogation, José Dominguez Pérez, has lost objectivity. He was the person who asked for her pre-trial detention that currently has her behind bars in the Chorrillo prison in Lima City. That's why she asked for the right to remain silent at the hearing. The public prosecutor is investigating Keiko Fujimori because they suspect her of leading a criminal web of asset laundering. And they say that during the 2011 presidential race, she received $1,200,000 for financing her electoral campaign. However, this resource that came from Odebrecht, the Brazilian company, wouldn't have come to Peru in a regular way, rather through people who hide these assets and get them as income from other activities that the party organised. It's important to mention that after she refused to answer questions during the hearing, many members of the party attacked the attorney Jose Dominguez Perez whilst he was leaving prison. They threw objects at him, one of them reached out and harmed him, and now he is in a delicate condition.
The Colombian city of Medellin has held a Gay Miss Universe beauty pageant where transgendered people and drag queens competed. Contestants could represent a country of their choice for the event, which aimed to send a message of inclusion to society. The winners received money and opportunities to participate in international competitions. We'll take a short break now. Stay with us. Welcome back. Officials say that the black boxes from the crashed Ethiopian Airlines show similarities to the Lion Air crash. According to Ethiopian Minister of Transport, at least one similarity is the length of time the planes were in the air before crashing. In October, all 189 people on board Lion Air Flight 610 were killed when the flight went down over the Java Sea in Indonesia 13 minutes after takeoff.
It's been already indicated that there are similarities. Particular similarities will be explained and more details will come out at each stage. But there are indications that there are clear similarities, especially with the number of minutes they spent after takeoff. But with the news revelations, it is better to pose questions to relevant authorities, as I'm doing right now here.
The World Food Program has stopped distributing food after 3 people died and 200 others became sick. The Uganda International Red Cross and Red Crescent says cases of people with suspected food poisoning were reported on Saturday, a day after food distribution to families. The World Food Program and the government of Uganda are still investigating the case. People have been warned not to eat the distributed food. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa got a taste of the daily frustrations of working-class commuters after the train he boarded on Monday was delayed by over 2 hours. Ramaphosa said the delay was unacceptable. The country's cities continue to be divided along race and class lines, with poor, predominantly black citizens living on the urban periphery far from the city-based workplaces. Uganda's members of parliament from the ruling party has endorsed 74-year-old President Yoweri Museveni to run for the 2021 presidential election. A victory at next election would extend his rule to 40 years. The government removed the 2-term presidential limit in 2005 and 2018 and scrapped the age limit of 75.
And everybody shouted hallelujah.
And far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has visited the CIA during his first trip to Washington. Bolsonaro is on an official 3-day visit to the United States. The Brazilian president will meet his counterpart Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday. The meeting was organized after the 2 right-wing leaders expressed mutual admiration for each other. A comic exhibition in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, is highlighting the experiences of refugees. The In-Transit exhibition has 350 artworks by 37 artists from 12 countries, including Syria, Germany, and Egypt. The illustrations are aimed at showing the problems migrants and refugees face. The illustrations are showing at the museum and Urban Cultural Center until March 24th.
It is kind of an artistic medium that can express stories and important serious subjects that the country is dealing with, or that are happening in the whole region, in a way that is different from how we usually receive information, through television, the news, and even photography. These illustrations are done in a narrative way, visually and through the text.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, tellusorenglish.net. and join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.
We are present at every